A lot of my research into DS dynamics talks about relationships that are more sexual in nature or marriages. Is it possible to have a more platonic DS relationship? I want to wait on sexual stuff until I'm married or in a serious relationship, but wondered about a less sexually focused DS relationship as I'm really interested in exploring this world and a relationship doesn't seem likely anytime soon. It's commonly talked about in relationships, marriages, sexual elements because DS is so fucking erotic. It doesn't have to be sexual, but it's very erotic. It's so erotic and it demands so much intimacy, so much vulnerability, and so much trust. Think of DS as emotional intercourse. It really is. And so to me, if you're wanting to stave off sexual intercourse, I would stave off the emotional too, because they get intermingled so fucking fast. There are pro arrangements, especially femdom pro arrangements, of course, all the time. That is non-sexual. But even then, I don't think it's non-sexual. You might not be having intercourse, but it's sexual. It's hitting their sexual arousal. It's hitting their kink arousal. It's hitting their submissive arousal. I want to wait on sexual stuff until I'm married. So you have a value for intimacy and vulnerability. And you have a value for keeping that in a specific context. If you try to get into, especially a newbie, wanting to keep it platonic, but wanting to explore, and wanting to save sex stuff until marriage, I think you're setting yourself up for unnecessary angst, unnecessary temptation, unnecessary turmoil. I personally would not do it. I would get educated as much as possible. I would figure out what you would want to do with a partner. I would have all of your checklists and rules and boundaries and everything set up, ready to go. But if you're not ready to be vulnerable and intimate emotionally or sexually, DS is not for you. DS demands intense levels of vulnerability and intense levels of intimacy. It both requires it and demands it to continue. Requires it to start and demands it to continue. So, are there platonic DS arrangements? Yes. Are there even platonic DS relationships? Yes, in the short term. They quickly turn sexual, though, often. There are elements, for sure, where you can have a platonic arrangement where, a rigger just needs to practice their rope ties and you just want to be bound. Like, you can have that. The negotiation and the parameters need to be very clearly set. Language needs to be watched very carefully. Types of communication, frequency of communication, all of that needs to be highly, highly monitored. And to me, it's not worth the angst to try to manage. Unless you're willing to get that vulnerable and that intimate, I wouldn't go there because you will get attached to a dominant. This is why it's so easy for dominants to have platonic arrangements, but not submissives. Very different on the top side. It's very different as a dominant. You can stay very emotionally detached as a dominant, as a top, in a way that you cannot as a submissive, because part of the submissive experience is the release, is the letting go. And that means free flowing emotions in a way that a dominant doesn't have to possess. So yeah, I personally would not advise it. But you know your level of mindfulness and self-control and all of that in a way that I don't. So trust yourself, trust your judgment, trust your own boundaries, and lean into your own convictions and belief system on that one, okay?